Hey everyone, James from TDB here, bringing you another Inbetweenisode. Today I am going to be making the case, basically, why if you're just starting out with Pu'erh, you should really get your baseline and focus on Dayi mid-age tea specifically, and why you should start out with this specific factory, as well as Dayi or factory tea versus kind of more of the boutique alternative. In many ways, the boutique allure is quite obvious in the sense of getting high quality leaves, kind of custom picked. It appears to a sort of like naturopathic instinct that I think a lot of us definitely have of getting like it from these like clean, pristine forests and whatnot. And it is also true that in the end, I like a lot of boutique Pu'erhs and stuff like that. And you very well might end up liking them, and they may become kind of your default Pu'erhs rather than factory tea. Nonetheless, they are kind of a strange tea. There is a lot of variability. There's a lot that goes into the processing. And they, I think when we were talking about simply getting a good solid baseline for a beginner, I think factory Pu'erh, in my opinion, definitely has a beat, specifically Dayi. There's a couple reasons for that. The first reason I have on my list is that boutiques are weird. I mean, I've had a veteran drinker I see comment once that you kind of have to taste through all of these different like house perfume notes that will be in each kind of like specific boutique. They were complaining about Taiwanese boutiques in particular, which are definitely a kind of a boutique dominant place, and you have to do that in order to taste kind of the core of the tea. With factory tea, I think it's a little simpler. And I say that as someone who has a lot of favorites amongst boutiques, but I also have a lot of favorites that are factory teas as well. And I think specifically Dayi tea provides the best baseline. And mid-age Dayi, I should be clear about that. I'm not talking about like 2020 or even 2015 Dayi. I'm talking about stuff specifically from the 2000s, probably the 2005 to 2009, 2010 range. I think that's generally the sweet spot. And it's in general easier to find this tea than it was a decade ago or 12 or 13 years ago when I was just getting started with Pu'erh. You can buy them from a lot of different places. The political situation in particular in regards to tariffs has changed a lot. So I'm just going to talk generally, and I think hopefully eventually we will get access to teas. We may have to pay a little bit more than before. But nonetheless, you can get these teas from places like Teas We Like, Quiche Teas, King Tea Mall. You can also go to Taobao, and Dayi is easier than ever to buy from there. You'll have to go through a shipping agent, someone like Superbuy or Ship Forwarder, but you are in general able to access and buy from a lot of these big brands, including teas that are kind of in that age range I'm talking about. In 2013, 2014, those teas were just simply much younger. The tea pre-reform, so we're talking about 2004 and older, those teas are also very good. They are harder to find, and they are also more expensive, and there's quite a few fakes, and the storage situation kind of in that time period is a little bit murkier than we're talking about from 2005 to 2009. So those are the reasons why I would say to focus on this range. Kind of represents the sweet spot of getting a good enough aging on the tea, but also not being way more expensive. Okay, so let's see, what else? What's the main reason? Well, it's basically that this represents kind of what Pu'erh was for a very long time, specifically after World War II. We're not going to be talking about that pre-war era at all, but like after that, the factories really were the dominant players. So 1950s all the way basically into, I mean, you could say that they're the dominant players now, but into certainly this century for sure. This is basically what Pu'erh was, pressing these and then storing them traditionally, typically in Hong Kong, where Pu'erh was far more of a kind of a regional specific beverage than it is now. So yeah, I would say that Munghai Tea Factory in particular represents kind of the best baseline that you can get there. So why not like some of the other factories like Haiwan, Shaoguan, or Mengku? Well, I think in general, Munghai Tea Factory tea is a bit better than those places. It also generally comes from what is historically a Pu'erh growing space as opposed to something up north when we're talking about some of those like Linsang teas. Not that Linsang hasn't grown a lot of Pu'erh before, but Munghai County in particular is really well known for growing leaf that goes into Pu'erh productions. And compared to something like Shagwan, I just think Munghai is a little bit more consistent. Of course, you could and should try those Shagwan teas eventually to see if that's something that you will like. But I think the Munghai Tea Factory is a little bit more of a consistent, setting a decently high bar as far as kind of a baseline standard goes. Absolutely nothing wrong with those things. Absolutely nothing wrong with boutiques either. I just simply think that factory tea is kind of an easier, you want to build the base of your knowledge and your taste palette before you kind of go off to these other different shiny objects. And it's been, interesting to see and reflect on how different tea drinkers will end up where they are. I've had certain tea drinkers that have been drinking for a long time, and they really are very inexperienced when it comes to these sorts of teas. In fact, I've had a tea friend who had tried like all of the big Taiwanese brands and stuff like that, and then he found out he just liked Shagwan. It's just sitting right there in front of him. So sometimes it's really good that you are able to drink these teas, sample them, try them, do cake splits, whatever, and just get your baseline that way. Okay, so what teas should you try specifically? I think when it comes to Munghai Tea Factory teas, you can't go wrong with 7542, 8582, specifically from that era. I like, generally speaking, the older you get, the better the production will be by a little bit. 2008 8582 is kind of like a perfect spot of being not very expensive, but also kind of a good benchmark as far as those teas go. For Shagwan, if we are to branch over to a different factory, Iron Cake 8653, 2005 is a classic, specifically earlier in the year. Some of the later ones are pretty good too, and you want to select teas that have had storage that is going to advance them, ideally. So not something that's not too dry, so ideally not Kunming, but something more like southern China, Taiwan, or the tropics down there like Singapore, Malaysia. Those places are good. But yeah, I think in general, we're talking about teas that are both cheaper than boutiques and offer a consistently better baseline. Boutique Pu'erh is really quite difficult, and choosing what processing you like and stuff like that is not terribly easy, and the good examples from the mid-2000s are quite expensive. So I think in many ways it's a very unideal place for beginners to start with. So you kind of gotta learn to walk first, and in that case I think we are talking about Big Factory Pu'erh. So that is my case. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree or disagree. I'm sure that this is one of those videos that is going to generate a fair bit of disagreement too, and I will of course be curious to hear those arguments, and I will see y'all next time. Cheers.